thank you all for being here tonight. Want to let you know before we get started that this series of programs is funded through a grant from the American Library Association and FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. And the thing you need to know about FINRA is that much of their money comes from fines that were paid by organizations who have been fined by the SEC. Did I get that right? Mm-hmm. I got that right. Okay. Every time I say it, I think, did I say the right thing? So we're actually benefiting from people who've done things they shouldn't, I guess, in a way. And their goal with this series of programs is to get the message across that the library is an unbiased place for financial information. You know, we're not trying to sell you anything. We have no reason for wanting you to be here other than to educate you about this. So this series of programs will run all the way through May of 2012. We have a couple of specialized programs. This is one of those programs. We're also doing a series on women and money. And our first in that series of programs will be November 5th. And that's a half-day program. And that was specifically designed for women who are going back into the workforce, or maybe who are recently widowed or divorced and handling family finances again after a period of time, or maybe for the first time. So those are coming up. And our general programs will be the first Thursday of every month, starting at 6:30. So you can always look for something. Our next one is on banking and credit. And then we'll do saving and investing. And in 2012, we'll get into more specific investing topics. So tonight, everybody should have a handout. We're going to go over how to save for retirement and your child's college education at the same time. Dr. Rauderkus is with us tonight, and she is an assistant professor of finance at UAB, has worked with Jumpstart Coalition, has done a lot of work with families and finance. So, perfect. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and if y'all have any questions, I'll be back here, and we'll do a Q&A afterwards as well. All right?
Good evening. I'm not a podium person, so I tend to walk around a lot, so if that bothers you, sometimes I make people busy, let me know. But I'm excited about being here. As Katie said, I do a lot of talks about personal finance, families in finance. I used to write a blog about finance and personal finance, 365 days on a budget. So this is a topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart. But specifically, we're talking about balancing retirement savings versus college savings. And so I just wanted to run down a punch list of what we're going to talk about. The way I kind of envisioned it was that on this topic, there's a lot of questions that, kind of the same questions that most people tend to ask. And so I like the frequently asked questions format. So hopefully in the few slides that I have prepared, only 11 slides, promise. But I talk a lot, so 11 is quite a bit for me. But so these 5 frequently asked questions are hopefully a starting point that will cover hopefully a lot of the types of questions that you tend to think about when we put these two topics together. And then, as Katie said, we'll have time afterwards if you have some specific things or something that I didn't cover. So I wanted to kind of start going back a little bit and talk about how times have changed over the years, and because sometimes we wonder, well, how come putting these two savings topics together is so problematic for us when our parents did it and put us through college? What's the big deal now? So we'll talk about that just very briefly to kind of give us a starting point. And then moving on, the really big question that comes up a lot, there's a lot of trade-offs when it comes to personal finance. And so people sometimes will ask, well, should I do this thing or that thing? And so if I had to pick one of them, which one should I pick? Or if I had to prioritize, can you help me figure out what's the best way to prioritize? So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then, you know, we don't necessarily want to pick one or the other. We kind of want to figure out how to do both. So we'll talk about how we might attack that. And then, this is families and finance, and so we really do want to try to get the family together on this, and I think that's actually really the starting point when I start getting into the more specifics of it, because I think that's the first part, to make sure that everybody's on board. And then finally, we will get into some specifics. I'm a finance professor. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not an investment advisor, so I'm not here to push any specific products on you. But even more than that, I'm not here to tell you got to do it this way and follow steps 1, 2, and 3. I'm just giving you some things to think about. I'm just giving you some things to think about and trying to answer some questions or just get you pointed in the right direction. So, going back a little bit, how did our parents do it? I don't remember, everybody's situation is different, but I don't remember when my brother and I were thinking about college that it was really a big deal. If you want to go, you go, and we work it out. Now, my father was a college professor, so as I know, and my husband knows, we have benefits by working at a university, so it makes it a little bit different for us, but it just seems like it's gotten more difficult over the years, and so what's that all about? So there's a few things that have changed, obviously. From the 1950s to the 1970s, purchasing power, or real income, went up quite a bit, and so that was kind of a boom time, and people just had a lot of money. And lately, it's kind of going the other way. We just don't have as much, and so we're stretched, and we're trying to do a lot of things with effectively less than we had before. So it's kind of an opposite time economically from maybe what our parents experienced. I probably don't want to restart the computer. I think it was trying to save before it wiped me out. Another big one, again, we're talking about college tuition and retirement savings. Pension plans have changed dramatically. Retirement plans, employer-sponsored plans have changed dramatically. It used to be you go to work out of college or out of high school, you work there 20, 30 years, however, until retirement age, and you're covered. You get a pension check every month for the rest of your life. And in those working years, you didn't have any contribution to make. That just by working there, that was part of your package, and you got a nice check every month in retirement. That's very rare these days. When it comes to retirement plans, employer-sponsored retirement plans, there's defined contribution plans where they will specify what you have to put in, and then there are defined benefit plans where they specify what you get out. We're moving from the defined benefit to the defined contribution. So it used to be that you were guaranteed that you were going to have this retirement income. Now it's more I don't want to say guaranteed, but you're advised to make a certain contribution, but there's no guarantees on what you're going to have at retirement. The market's volatile. There are just so many other factors these days that companies just don't give those guarantees anymore. So the makeup of pension plans have changed, and so what all that means to us is that we have to be a lot more proactive when it comes to retirement. We have a lot more responsibility when it comes to retirement than folks did a generation or two ago. I can't see my bullet point, so I'm on the third bullet point. College tuition was cheaper. I think that's, I don't know if you can see these down at the bottom, but if you've got the handout, I didn't take a look at it, so I don't know if they show up there. But these blurbs down here are just talking about the price of tuition. Most recent figures say that the average college tuition at a public four-year institution right now is $7,600. At private institutions, it's $27,000. I think UAB is about $4,000, something like that. So UAB is a little bit less expensive than average. But in 1980, Average tuition at a 4-year institution was $3,499, so less than half of what it is today. So, when you calculate growth rates and think about that on a percentage basis, that's a significant increase. So the price of college tuition is going up faster than inflation, faster than the economy is growing. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to wrap our arms around this. And then the last point that I was making here is that, in prior generations, people tended to start families at a younger age. And so what that meant was if you got started earlier when you were in your 20s, right out of college, early to mid-20s, then you could focus on college, and then your kids are off to college, before you're even in your 50s, and then you still have not a lot of time, but if you focus more on the college savings and the retirement savings, you still have work life left. For a lot of us, we're starting later, and by the time the kids are in college, we're kind of a lot closer to retirement than maybe our parents were, and so it changes the dynamic in terms of the investment horizon. Any way I can move that over a little? It's the projector, it's not the laptop, is it?
I don't know. I haven't seen you do that.
I guess I'll stand back here. So the next thing I wanted to talk about then, so we've kind of got the foundation why we have more to think about, why it's a little bit more difficult these days than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. What all this drives some of us to is trying to decide, well, if I've got these two big nuts to crack, saving for my own retirement or saving for my kids' college education, which one do I pick? Or if it's not a one or the other issue, how do I prioritize? And so any financial advisor will tell you that if you can't fully fund both buckets the way that you want, you really need to put retirement first. And this is kind of I don't want to say extreme example, but I didn't go middle of the road here, but yeah, I was one of those parents, when my kids were first born, I'm sending Mike to Harvard. If he wants to go to Harvard, I'm going to send him to the best school. If that's what he wants, anything for him, everything else is secondary. So, so you start thinking about this trade-off, as you start doing the math, and I think once on my blog I actually did the math, and it was eye-opening. You start doing the math and you think about how much a Harvard education is going to cost you, especially given that right now it's about $30,000 a year, just tuition. And they still have to eat and live somewhere and all that sort of stuff. But it's not fixed. So that cost is going to continue to increase. But right now, it's about $30,000, give or take, a year to go to an Ivy League school. And so you're weighing that against retirement. And the issue is that if you decide to just put everything into the college tuition bucket and focus on that goal, I even thought about, well, he might not even want to go to Harvard, but I thought, well, I want to put everything aside that I can, so if that's the decision that he wants to make, then the money is there for him, and I don't want him to go without because I didn't. Well, the issue is that if I put everything there, and I started looking at, well, what was going to be left over for me to save for retirement, there wasn't a whole lot. So it was mostly going to be just Social Security. And if you pay attention to what's happening with Social Security, I don't remember the latest projection, but I believe that my retirement date is after the date that Social Security is currently supposed to run out. So that's probably not a good choice for me to depend solely on Social Security for my retirement income. So, if you go this route, it's a choice. If I were to go this route, put all my money towards putting my kids in Harvard, then I might run out of retirement income because I didn't have enough saved to fully cover that. So then, what do I do? There's no Social Security, not enough retirement. What were you going to say?
Have you ever thought about this? Take the children and put them through first, and then let them help you.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. That's what happens. Is that, and that's what a lot of families choose to do. Focus on the children first, and then once they get theirs, hopefully they're going to come back and take care of you. But so that's a position a lot of families are in. So younger generation folks, they're coming out of college. They do have great educations. They are able to command high salaries, and so they're starting their own families and caring for their children, and then they're reaching back and caring for the parents because the parents have sacrificed for them. And that's certainly a choice. The other side of it is that if you choose retirement first over college education, and this is just a simple example, if you wanted to have $40,000 in annual retirement income, which isn't a lot, but you figure your expenses tend to be less in retirement. But if you wanted to have $40,000 in annual retirement income, and I was figuring this, if you retire at 65, life expectancy is about 85 years, so you've got 20 years in retirement, that you need about $700,000 in principal at the time that you retire in order to do that. And so in order to come up with $700,000, it might be tough to swing an Ivy League education, especially considering how many children you might have. It might be tough to come up with $700,000 in principal by the time you're 65, plus also pay for the Ivy League education. So I'm never going to tell anybody that you should definitely pick it one way or the other, but what I like to do is just inform about exactly what trade-offs you're making. But a lot of people would advise to focus on retirement first. Actually, not everybody does that. A lot of people do choose to focus on the children first. Some children come back and regret that they have that burden. Some parents feel uncomfortable creating that burden, but that's a family decision. But let's talk about doing both. So it doesn't have to be an either-or proposition. It can be both, but understanding that maybe it's not both, meaning Ivy League education and retiring as a millionaire. Question?
I heard some people said first they will set up your retirement plan like your 401k, but when the kids go to the college, you can borrow money from the 401k.
That's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So thinking about doing them both, I think I mentioned this earlier, depending on how old your children are, but we've started to have that discussion with our children, and they're just 6 and 9. You want to start getting everyone involved in the discussion and talking about, well, what can we realistically afford and what makes sense. I mean, some families that have no financial constraints, and so they can have the $1 million retirement and the Ivy League education. My family isn't one of those. And so right now the discussion is primarily between my husband and me about, well, what do we think is reasonable? Another thing to think about is that some families say that means isn't the only part of the equation. That sometimes that, and I think this is more of a finance phrase, sometimes it just makes sense for the kids to have some skin in the game. That if you send them just to college and foot 100%, including the pizza and beer money on Friday night, that they're not as vested. But if they have to do something, then it makes a difference. They're going to work a little bit harder. My parents had kind of similar rules. They would pay, I think they would pay 100% if I lived on campus, but if I wanted to have an apartment, which was not necessary, they would pay for what it would cost to live on campus, and I had to pay anything else. So basically, whenever I made a decision that was counter to what they thought made sense, I had to pay for it. So actually my husband and I are kind of leaning in that same direction, that we will create a fund that will cover our kids for the education that we think is reasonable. So it may not be Harvard, but it may be the best that we can reasonably afford and still do the things that we want to do. And plus, the four of us still have to live before they get to college.
Another option, some people take also, let your children go to a, what do you call it, a 2-year college and get your core things out of the way and then head to the Ivy League.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it makes it much cheaper that way.
Oh, sure. So I think what we kind of came up with, and we're still working through it. Our kids, so we're building the fund, but we're working through what the agreement will be with the children. But effectively, what we're getting to is they're going to have these accounts that aren't in their name, so they don't have control over. They can't go out and buy sports cars. But by the time they graduate high school, they will have funds, and it's up to them. We will together come up with, but they will have a large say-so in how they use it. And so if they opt to do the 2-year school, where it will be cheaper up front, then they can afford a more prestigious, more expensive school for the core classes that tend to be the more important thing and the final degree. If they decide that they really want to go to Harvard, then they're going to have to figure out how to make up the difference. So early enough for them to make good decisions, they will know what is available to them, and then they'll have to make it up. And so our logic is that we would fully pay for UAB, Auburn, Alabama. There would be enough to pay for something like that. But if they wanted something more expensive, that was up to them. So they're going to have to pay for their part. They're going to have to pay for part of their college expense themselves. One thing that I didn't put here that some people will suggest is they'll say you should tell your children up front that they're going to have to take out loans. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Well, number one, I just don't like to say you should do this, this, and this. And I get nervous saying that student loans should definitely be part of someone's financial plan. It's okay. As I tell my students, we think about debt as being good debt and bad debt. Good debt, if there is any such thing as good debt. Good debt we tend to think of as when you're investing in an asset that appreciates in value. And so most of the time, real estate appreciates in value. Businesses, most of the time, appreciate in value. Cars depreciate in value. New shoes depreciate in value, as much as it pains me to say. But investing in yourself is a good investment, and so that's what makes student loans not a bad investment unless students go crazy with it. The trouble is sometimes you get this award letter that says you're eligible for all this money and you only need this much, but for some reason students just see all the zeros and sign for everything. So I'm a little bit reluctant to say that loans have to be a part of the package, but when used wisely, it makes sense. So the whole idea here is just that the family needs to all be on the same page, whatever page that is, whatever works for that family, but understanding that you all have needs. So you've got retirement needs, you've got college needs, and we need to figure out how to make sure that everybody's needs are met. And if the children decide that they want to go out and have the finest education and take responsibility for the parents later on, then that's a family decision and that makes sense. But as long as everybody's together with it, that's what's most important in my mind. So if you want to get the children involved early on, and the idea here, and again, it's not about giving you steadfast things that everybody absolutely has to do in order to make this work, but it's just some ideas. But the side benefit of getting kids involved early is they get some appreciation for savings and money management and fiscal responsibility. So one piece of advice is to open up a college fund, so just a plain old savings account, but that's just for college. That's separate from any retirement accounts, any tax-deductible college savings account, but just something that you can easily add money to, so that the kids are involved. So, how many people have heard of the 3-jar system, where there's lots of variations to it? So, one way that we teach kids to manage money is we give them 3 jars or some equivalent of that, and tell them whenever they get money, whether it's babysitting or birthday money or holiday money or whatever it is, that so much goes in the spending jar, so much goes in the savings jar, and so much goes in the donate or charity jar. And so, so that's kind of one way to think about it. That, and you all decide, well, what proportion? Sometimes with our kids, we just say, as long as something goes in each one. And then you make decisions, however you all agree, on how to actually allocate the money in each jar. So this maybe the spending jar, you can do whatever you want with it, as long as you have money in the other jars. The savings jar might be that college fund. That's their contribution to their college fund. Maybe it doesn't amount to much, but they get the understanding that they're a part of it too, and they've got some responsibility for it too. And then as they get older and they get jobs that pay paper money instead of just the kind that clinks in the jar, then they can continue it. And so maybe the money actually goes to a bank account. And then the donate and charity jar is also a great thing that the family can decide, well, do we have favorite charities, or is it going to religious organizations? But one way to think about it. So income, bank account, and they need to have their own accounts. So because with some kids it becomes a competition. I saved more, or I was more responsible, and it's just something. They need to have ownership. So it needs to be separate. Now, what I've seen some families do, though, is they just keep a ledger, because having lots of bank accounts gets kind of cumbersome. There's the vacation account, and there's the holiday account, and there's the college fund for kids 1 through 12. And so that might be a lot of accounts, but what you can do is just have one account, and then you keep a spreadsheet where you keep track of who has what in each account. I've read some great articles about families doing that with their kids, and then basically they have the bank of mom and dad. So they can create statements if they want to, but instead of having all the headache of having all these accounts, they can track it themselves and share it. Thank you. And share it with the kids. And so, however you do that, those statements, those updates need to be shared with the kids, again, to keep them on board. And another thing is friends and relatives can get involved. I saw one recommendation that if grandparents and other friends and relatives regularly give gifts for birthdays and holidays, one thing that you could suggest is, still give the toys or the clothes or whatever it is, but maybe take half of what you would spend and give it to them for their college fund. And it can be cash just to go into the bank account, or if we'll talk about other types of college savings, it can go directly into one of those accounts. But again, making sure that the kids know what it is, and so they kind of feel that sense of ownership. So let's start getting into the specifics. So we talked about the trade-offs. We talked about getting the whole family involved and specific ways to get children involved. So now let's go beyond just putting money in the piggy bank and think about how we might go about saving for retirement and saving for college. If your funds are limited, meaning you kind of want to prioritize a little bit toward retirement, but you're not quite in the position where you can max out your retirement savings, meaning when we save for retirement, the great thing about it is with our tax benefits. So we can save for retirement pre-tax, and so one of the things that we want to do is try to save up to the maximum of those tax limits, if at all possible. If we're not able to do that, for example, I think I have the limits on another slide. I want to say $16,500 if you're under 50, and $22,000 if you're over 50 are the contribution limits. And that's That's a lot of cabbage. And so if you can't do $16,500 or $22,000, depending on your age, if you can't make that level of contribution or more, then what some people, and again, I'm not saying this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, but what some people would advise is not to save for retirement and college separately, to put all of the money into retirement savings because you want to max out the retirement savings first, get the tax benefits, make sure that you are covered. I know that's a little off-putting to some people, but bear with me for just a second. So the idea is if you want to keep it simple, you don't want to have separate accounts or you just don't have a whole lot of money to save just yet, then the idea is you put it all into retirement savings. The tax deductible retirement plans. Your contribution is tax deductible, so the earnings are tax deferred, so you get the tax benefits there. And then when you withdraw, and I'm going to come back to this in a second, there's some caveats, but when you withdraw those funds to pay for college expenses, because we're just putting everything in one pot, you don't have to pay a penalty on it, because you know when we make withdrawals because we want to buy shoes, I got a thing for shoes, if you haven't already figured it out, but if we make withdrawals for trivial purchases, let's say, we'll get a penalty if we're taking that out of our retirement account. But if we're taking it out for college expenses, most of the time there's no penalty. But again, I'm going to come back to that in a second. The other thing is that, remember earlier I said, for the kids' college fund, that's just their babysitting money and birthday money, portion of the birthday money and stuff like that. You can just throw that in a plain old savings account. Well, if you have it in a retirement account, so these are the bigger dollars. If you have them in a retirement account, you're less likely to tap into it. But if it's just over at Regions and you can go use the ATM and grab a couple of $100, it's so easy to pinch off of it. So if you put this money in a retirement account, you're less likely to spend it. And then the other positive is that when your kids are ready to go to college and they fill out the financial aid form, which is something that you want your kids to do whether or not they have financial need. You never know what kinds of things they might be eligible for. The fact that you have retirement assets does not affect their eligibility for financial aid. So if you put all of your retirement and college savings into a retirement plan, it doesn't affect their eligibility. So that's a big deal. But now, let's talk about the specifics of this. When I'm talking about retirement plans, I'm talking about 401ks that you would have at a for-profit company, 403bs at a not-for-profit, IRAs, individual retirement accounts that you would take out on your own. So all of this category of retirement vehicles. If we look at the pros and cons, though, of using your retirement funds to pay for college, there's a few things that you need to be aware of. So I said you might want to do this because it's simple. A, because it's simple, and B, if you just don't have a lot to start splitting up into different pots, then maybe it makes sense to put it all in one. Well, let's look at the pros first. If you're using your 401k to do this, typically, when it's time for your kids to go to college, you can just take out a loan against your 401k to pay their college expenses. And the interest rate is low. So you possibly get a lower interest rate, maybe not lower than what you would get on a student loan, but lower than you would get on a regular bank loan. The downside, and the other thing is you're borrowing it from yourself. So the repayment terms tend to be a little bit more flexible. The downside is that you're borrowing out of an employer-sponsored plan. If for some reason you leave that employer, you're going to have to pay that money back right away. So if you've taken out a lot of money, you might only have 60 days to pay it back. So you want to be careful about that. Another positive to this way of saving is that, I touched on this before, if you pay expenses with the 401k funds, again, it doesn't impact your child's eligibility for financial aid. Now, let's look at IRAs though. If you use an IRA, so take a withdrawal from your IRA to pay for college, again, no early, what do they call it? Early distribution penalty, because it's a qualified expense. Now, they're going to be specific about what college expenses. In fact, one of the new things is you can't, a computer doesn't count. It used to be that if you buy your child a laptop to go to school or a desktop or whatever, that would count as a qualified college expense. It doesn't count anymore. But tuition fees, and there might be stuff about certain institutions that aren't credible, and I don't mean, you know, the administrators are Bama fans, so they don't count Auburn, but or LSU. Sorry, but I mean, if it's a just certain not-for-profit or for-profit institutions and that sort of thing. Last one. Oh, another thing that you can do, again, looking at the IRA, is that, so you're making these contributions to your IRA over time, and those contributions are earning, you know, earning interest, gaining and increasing in value. If the withdrawals that you make for your college expenses from that IRA are only your contributions, because you, in your statement, you'll see over time how much you put in and then how much the account gained in value. If you stop once you deplete all the contributions but keep the gains, you're not going to incur any taxes, so that's another benefit. The downside of taking money out of an IRA, remember we said with the 401k, somewhere we said with the 401k, that there was no impact on your eligibility for financial aid. With the IRA, if you take a withdrawal, that counts as income to you. So now if you take a withdrawal out of your IRA, that's no longer a retirement asset that doesn't count in the financial aid calculation. If you take that withdrawal, that's now extra income. So the next year, when they do their financial aid form and check eligibility, you had this big bump in income. So what some people would say is if you have to do this, or if you decide to do this, wait until their last year, so then it doesn't matter.
Does this count for grandchildren also? Do you know?
The financial aid eligibility shouldn't count for grandchildren, but I don't know, I'm not positive, I'd have to check if the withdrawal for college education for a grandchild would count as a qualified expense, so you wouldn't get the penalty. I believe it would not count, but I'm not positive, so don't quote me on that. So just finishing out the downside of using retirement funds to pay for college expenses. Oh, you had a question?
I just was trying to line up which bullets belonged at.
Oh, they don't
Actual-
necessarily.
No, it's the actual withdrawals versus borrowing against. The first bullet, you can borrow funds. So essentially, if I just fictitiously, if I had $100,000 in my retirement account, I could take $50,000 additional from some financial institution at the prime rate plus 1 or 2%.
This first one is saying if you had $100,000 in your 401k, you can borrow $50,000 of it for college tuition.
But total funding that I would have to put towards college would still be $100,000. It wouldn't be $150,000. I'm not taking a loan from somebody else's money. I'm taking a loan from
You're
mine.
taking a loan from your money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
So who am I paying?
you only have 50. You can only take out 50%.
Sure, you can only take out half of the total
Right,
value.
right.
But so it's
And then you
Yeah.
basically pay yourself back plus 2%. The bank
Yes.
will let you take your own money.
yeah. So the bank's making money.
Better from the
Right,
withdraw
because they
from
would
the
protect you from
401k
taxes.
better than IRA.
Is borrowing from the 401k better than what?
Than from IRA.
Well, if you borrow, it's up to you. If you borrow from the 401k, that is a loan, and you are charged interest, and you do have to pay it back. If you're planning on leaving your job, or
Pay back.
You have
Depends
to
on
pay.
how well your 401k performs too, right?
Sure.
If your 401k performs really well, then
Maybe you can afford to take it. And that's, that goes to some of the other things on the downside. Withdrawing or taking out loans, however you get money out of your retirement, is going to slow down your progression towards retirement. But if you put the money in thinking that you were going to use some of it for college, then that's really not an issue. You were anticipating that. Oh, and then also, so I've got 401k at the top and then IRAs at the bottom. The IRA withdrawals, in addition to increasing or decreasing the financial aid eligibility, it's also potentially taxable. That depends on if it's a traditional IRA or Roth IRA. So those rules still apply.
Just another fictitious mathematical situation. Say, again, I have $100,000, I borrow $50,000. The next year, or even that year, I have a stellar performance in my 401k, and it goes back up to $100,000. Just pick the exact right stock or something. Does the loan then expire because I've made it back up to my original value, or do I still have to pay on the $50,000 till I've got to $150,000?
you're not withdrawing it, you're just borrowing against it, right?
So I guess it's
No,
okay.
you're actually, if you're taking a loan, you're actually depleting that account with the understanding that you're going to pay it back. But that's a good question. So how does that work if you want to go back for more? So how is the 50% calculated? Is it 50% total, or is it 50% at any one time that you take it out? I'm not positive. I was putting this together thinking about a one-time thing. I can find out, but I'm
Okay,
not positive.
sure, yeah.
So quick double check, so a 401k, 403b, or IRA are all considered a retirement account, and not any one of those would be considered an asset when financial aid is being determined.
Correct.
Okay.
The difference is that if you take out the loan or make the withdrawal,
Correct, on where
whether or
it
not that's
I
counted.
understand.
The IRA withdrawal would be counted.
Gotcha.
But at any time that it's just sitting in the account, that's not counted.
Excellent.
I touched on this earlier that when you have, so we talked about putting it all into a retirement account, but maybe you've maxed out the retirement account and you've got more money that you want to put aside for college. Now we're switching gears and talking exclusively about college. Do you want to put those accounts in your kids' names? A lot of people would argue against that. One reason is because, again, going back to financial aid eligibility, 35% of your child's assets are counted towards eligibility, meaning they figure 35% of their assets should be available to cover college costs, but only 6% of yours. So if you have more money that you want to set aside and you're trying to figure out how to create the ownership for whatever account you're going to create, you want to put it in your name if at all possible. And then the other side, and my husband and I joke about that, is we're afraid if we build up these nice accounts that they'll decide, so if I don't go to college, it's my money and I can just go off and find myself in a Maserati or whatever. Not that I think we have Maserati money by the time they go off to college, but it's something to think about.
Even joint accounts?
Joint accounts would be fine because then if it's joint custody, yes, because then you'd have to sign off on it, and that tends to be the preferred way.
Does the joint account still fall under the 6% then?
It should, yes, because what happens is you're the primary.
Okay.
So, continuing with college savings, 529 plans, or college savings, let's talk about 529 plans. A 529 plan is basically the same kind of vehicle as a 401k, except it's strictly for college savings. There are no federal taxes on the gains on the account, particularly when they're used, or if they are used specifically for qualified college expenses. The money can be used, there is some eligibility, as I was talking about before. When we talk about qualified expenses, there's some eligibility with regard to the schools. But most public four-year institutions can qualify. And then also, as we talked about before, with gifting from grandparents and relatives, that anybody can make a contribution. So if parent or grandparents and relatives routinely give money as a gift to your child, you might want to consider having them put that sum or all of that money into their college fund and make sure that the child is aware of it. We used to do savings bonds, and that's kind of fallen out of favor to some extent. But 529 plans would be another great way to have the whole family, the extended family, get involved. And then the nice thing is, if you want to do it routinely through direct deposit, you can put aside as little as $15 a month. So one thing, we talked about the trade-off between college and retirement, but that most of us really want to do them both at some level. Just doing $100 a month, or even just $15 a month, as soon as a child is born, on average, I think we calculated it out. We've put aside $100 a month per child starting the month after they were born. They'd have about $40,000 by the time they graduated from high school. It's not enough to go to Harvard for 4 years, but it's enough to go to UND for 4 years. So it just kind of depends on what the priorities are. And $100 a month isn't so difficult if you start early. So types of 529 plans. So I'm not specifically talking about Alabama yet.
How are the 529s treated as far as financial aid is concerned?
The 529, they're treated the same way. I thought that I had it here. They're treated the same way as their retirement.
So strategically,
Parental assets.
sorry. Strategically, it makes sense then to leave 529 as pays in the parent's name until after the initial financial aid calculation is made. Good to know.
So they work like a 401k or an IRA. They come in a couple of flavors. So there are the savings and the prepaid. We know there's no prepaid in Alabama. But the savings plans have two different types. There's the direct sold, kind of like when you have a discount broker, where you go in online and you to your E-Trade account and you buy and sell your securities yourself without any investment advice, and you take control. You don't. It's cheaper that way, but you don't get any advice. So that's the same idea with these direct sold savings plans. And then the alternative would be the broker sold. So that's where you get full service. You just go to a financial advisor, you sit down, tell them what's going on, what you need. They hold your hand and take care of everything. It might cost you a little bit more, but you're getting a service for those extra fees. So there might be a sales charge, there might be some additional fees, but they're providing additional services. And then the other type, in contrast to savings, is prepaid. So where you're actually prepaying for the cost of in-state tuition. And sometimes, it depends on the plan, it can be converted to private tuition or out-of-state tuition. In Alabama, this first bullet talks about the tax implications. So the tax implications are different state by state. So these are state-based plans. Remember I said for a 529 plan, there's no federal taxes on the 529 plan, but the state taxes depend on what state you're in. In Alabama, then, your contributions up to $5,000 per person, or $10,000 if you're married filing jointly and both parents are contributing to the plan. That's the contribution limit that is tax deductible when figuring out your Alabama taxable income. So it doesn't mean that that's all you can contribute, it's just that you don't you're gonna pay taxes on the additional contributions. So the plans themselves that are available in Alabama, we have a direct sold and a, what do I call the other type? The broker sold. So there is a direct sold and a broker sold. There used to be a prepaid plan, as probably most everybody knows, but it is closed to new enrollments as of 2009 or 2010, very recently. So if you're not going to be in Alabama in fact, my husband and I have this problem. We've been in 3 states since our children were born, and they're not terribly portable plans. In that if you move from state to state, you don't lose your contributions because that was your money and you put it in, but oftentimes, and again, it depends on the state, you lose the state matching contribution. So our kids have 529 plans in Louisiana, New York, and Alabama because it just didn't make sense to close the accounts and lose that extra money. And so, but fortunately, and it's interesting, the Alabama plans are managed by Union Bank and Trust. They manage, I would say, the majority of the state plans, and so they actually manage all 3 of our plans for all 3 states that we've been in. And that's exactly what they advise us. They said, you can, with us, no matter where they decide to go to school, they'll be able to take the cash and get it out. The Louisiana wasn't just for Louisiana schools in New York and Alabama and so on. So but it all depends on the state and it all depends on the administrator.
I have a question. Sure. For the back to net plans, is your money or your child money? Is it under your name or under the child?
It's under your name, but usually it's joint custody, but you would be the primary holder. So again, we had that question that how does it affect financial aid eligibility? It would show as an asset of yours, so it would not affect their eligibility.
So for this money, for the only purpose you spend for your child tuition education, but if you spend on other, it's okay. For example, if your child go to the college, get your full scholarship.
Yeah, you can take, it's your money, so you can take it back out if you decide, for example, if your child decides not to go to college,
Yeah.
it's your money, so you can take it back out.
You still can control by that, right? Okay. So how about this, if this happen, how about the tax? You need to pay the 3 tax over.
Yeah, so if you take it back out and don't use it for college expenses, then you're going to have, you're going to lose some of the benefits of it, but it's typically in regard to any matching contributions from the state. You're not going to lose your contribution, but there might be some tax implications.
Okay, got it.
That was it. So what other questions can I answer?
To go back to the idea of withdrawing from your IRA
Uh-huh.
or retirement fund to pay for college, I guess, does it make sense strategically then, again, to withdraw, if you have to withdraw towards the end of the college education? Because
Yes.
okay, because that's
If you're withdrawing from the IRA, yes, because that withdrawal will count as income to you, which would reduce their,
financial aid. Will that reduce all children's financial aid, or just the?
yes, all of your children, yes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
You can go to your grandchildren too, right?
Yes, and we had that question earlier about grandchildren. I don't think grandchildren's college expenses count as a qualified expense. I think it's just for immediate family, but I'm not exactly sure. But a grandparent can contribute to a 529. But if the grandparent opens the 529 in their name, well, we were talking more about IRAs. If it's a grandparent's IRA, I don't think withdrawals for college expenses are qualified. Certainly, if it's a 529, a grandparent can make contributions without, just as easily as a parent, even automatic contributions. If the grandparent is the owner of the account, I'm not exactly sure how that works. Fair question.
Yeah, so when you were talking about those maximum donation calculations of 16.5 when you're under 50 and 22 when you're over, that's a total contribution for all children or per child?
No, that's the annual contribution for a retirement account. Because that was when we were talking about using your retirement account for college and
Without tax
retirement.
penalty, right?
Gotcha,
Hmm?
gotcha.
That's the max you can donate without tax penalty, right?
Right,
If you go over that amount, then you have to pay a tax penalty.
right.
Okay.
Now, for 529, there are contribution limits, but it's a little bit different. It's kind of fuzzier. The idea is that you're not supposed to contribute more. You're not supposed to kind of backdoor it and use it as a retirement plan because of the tax benefits. And so you're not supposed to contribute more than that child's education will cost, because you don't get one account for all of your children. You have separate accounts for each child, and so the contributions should be somewhat matched to the expected cost of their college education. If you contribute more than, I believe it's $13,000 in a calendar year, then that could be subject to a gift tax, because they're effectively saying that anything over $13,000 would probably be excessive and more than what the college costs. $13,000 in 1 year, not total. And so if you put in more than $13,000, you might be charged a gift tax. Because again, since it's so easy for other relatives to contribute to a 529, it's a great way for families to do estate planning. If the grandparents want to have some involvement in paying for the grandchildren's college tuition, a 529 is a great way to do it. They can set it up automatically. They can, for every grandchild, and it's marked for that particular purpose, and it's pretty simple.
So quick question then, if the 529 is in each individual child's name, let's say one gets a scholarship and you want to use some of that for one of the other two, can you roll them into the other ones?
Yes, you can,
Without
you can
penalties?
redistribute. It depends on the particular state.
It
You know,
depends
again,
on
these
the
aren't
way
federal
that-
plans, they're
Sure,
state-based
so-
plans, but there are specific guidelines for how to withdraw the funds.
Gotcha.
If the child, if something happens to the child, or if the child decides not to pursue a college education, or if you want to reallocate funds to another child, they got the scholarship, there's more funds than needed. So yes, it can be done, but you'd have to check with the plan administrator to find out exactly how it's done, which is why it's ideal that you have them with the same administrator.
You want to set up a 529 plan if you choose to go that way for each child, but if I heard you correctly, you want to leave that in your name until after the financial aid is calculated?
Well, it's basically going to be a joint account with you being the primary holder, and you don't really switch it
Okay,
at any time, so it pretty much stays that way. So you stay
as a
in-
joint account.
Yeah, you stay in control of it. When I was talking about accounts in children's names, is if let's say you want to put in more than $13,000 a year.
Mhm.
You know, you've already maxed out. You've done more than $16,500 in your retirement accounts. You're doing more than $13,000 a year in the 529. So what's that? $30,000.
Yeah.
30,000.
Yeah.
It's
So.
free tax.
Right, so you're over $29,500 and you still want to put more in. Now you're talking about non-tax deductible savings, and so that could be in anybody's name.
Also in Alabama, if you're transferring that PACT over to the parent's name, I'm a grandparent at this point, they charged me $175 transfer fee for each child
For each
to
child.
put it into the family, into their parents' name
So that was to liquidate PACT?
from me. Yeah.
To liquidate your PACT
To get my
contribution.
name off and to put, transfer it to the parents.
Okay, oh,
They
okay.
charged $175 a child. And I screamed bloody murder.
It's a five
It did no good.
It's 529 plan. It's a 529 plan.
Yeah, PACT is a prepaid
She's asking
529
if it was
plan.
for 529.
Oh.
So with PACT, do you have accounts, you had separate accounts for the same
I had a
child?
separate pack for each child.
But you had accounts and then the parents had accounts? Or?
No, the parents didn't have one.
Oh, okay, it was just your.
I set it up, because
Okay.
I thought I was looking ahead,
Right.
and I did
Right.
at that point. And then as they are of college age, I decided the parents need to take over this.
Mhm.
And so I transferred it, and then I got this bill, $175
Each.
per child,
Wow.
and there were 6 of them.
Oof.
It nearly
Yeah, I
killed
heard
me.
about they always have the hiding fee, you don't know, and happen they mail you the bill.
I don't know, I couldn't.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How do you handle allowance and saving money with your child? Because I have a 3 and 6-year-old. I didn't know how to start the whole allowance, if they should work for it or you give per week or.
That's the first debate. Some people say that they should work for it. Other people say that taking out the trash and making your bed is a part of being in the family, and that you shouldn't get paid for that. So so that's a decision that you have to make first. So some people say then allowance is for specific things, or they just get a certain amount of allowance. Either way, you decide what's the certain amount. What one rule of thumb is related to their age, because it should grow as they get older. I'll just tell you what we do. We do 50% of their age per week. So our kids get $3 and $4.50 a week. We actually started this a couple of years ago, and they had no concept of money. We've done it both ways, actually, and with varying success. I mean, it's definitely gotten better as they've gotten older, because they have more of an understanding of money. But you have your part to do too, and what I mean by that is that when we did it the first time, we did what we called shore points. So we actually gave them money for certain things, because the bed wasn't getting made and the trash wasn't getting out, and so I thought, well, how do I incentivize them? I'm putting my managerial hat on, so I'm trying to incentivize them to do their chores. And so we had a chart on the refrigerator, and so they put stars on each chore that they did each day, and at the end of the week, each star was worth 10 cents or something, and then that was what they got. They were more interested in playing with the stars than what it really meant. I mean, it just was nothing. Huh?
They go union on you?
Pretty close. Pretty close. Now they just get the money, but they're expected. So, and then they could. Back then they could get negative chore points too. It didn't do anything. Now it's more of a. These are the things that you're expected to do as a member of this household. Mommy does this, Daddy does this, and you have to do these things. And you get $3 or $4.50 because you're a contributing member of the family, and we're not keeping score on what you did or what you didn't do each week. They're a little bit older, and so they're really excited. And so Sunday is payday. They have their little banks. They have they're supposed to set it aside. We used to tell them what percentage was supposed to be spend and save and donate. We don't do that anymore, except when they need extra math work. So we'll sit there and count it out and figure it out. That works a lot better. They understand how much video games cost and how many weeks it takes to save up enough allowance to do it. But that's what works for us.
Do they ever ask you how much you get to make your bed up?
They did when we did it that way.
Yeah. I mean, this can backfire.
Well, actually, when we did that, we nipped that in the bud pretty quickly, because they had a list of chores that they had to do, and the list got longer as they got older. And so they said, well, what about you? What do you have to do? And so we pulled out our list. And they didn't bother us anymore about that, because they didn't want to get more chores.
That's what you charge them for your meals.
Anything else I can answer?
I wanted to ask you a question, because I haven't lived in Alabama that long. Is there, in the colleges here, do they have what they call a co-op?
Yes, there is work study. In fact, I teach a personal finance course, and this is actually what we talked about in class this week. And so, in fact, let me tell you a couple of things that I told them that might be useful. When students, one thing that we are always amazed by is how students overlook scholarship and financial aid opportunities and work study opportunities. So we call it, at UAB we call it work study. And the way it works is that when the students apply initially, I believe it's just as simple as checking a box that says I want to be considered for all financial aid and scholarship opportunities, and you'd be amazed by how many people don't check the box. The other thing that you'd be amazed by, I'm in the School of Business, is the amount of scholarship money that we have that we can't give away. Because, you know, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we don't either, there'll be specific scholarships, like I was telling my students this week. You know, we'll get someone who will donate money, but the money has to go to a person who's purple or has 5 thumbs. And you know, we know there's people with 5 thumbs out there, but they don't check the box, so we don't know about them. So I was telling them, you know, you really have to get to know your professors and get to know the work study people and let them know that you're out there and you're interested. Also, at the end of the year, we always have merit scholarships. And we'll have, in my department, we'll have half a dozen merit scholarships, and we end up giving them all to the same person. Because we just, you know, nobody stands out. Nobody, because they'll be for things like has the most potential, or, you know, there's one for the highest GPA, and the rest are all kind of fluffy, and if nobody stands out, you know, it all goes to the same person. Also, there's a website called FastWeb, www.fastweb.com, and it's a free website, and the students go in and create a profile, and FAST, F-A-S-T, web.com, and the students go in and create a profile. It's free, and they can even, I would recommend doing this in high school, getting a head start. You create a profile, and now they're going to ask you things like race and gender and where you live and that sort of thing, but the reason for that is that they have a huge database of scholarship and grant opportunities, and so they're going to match your profile or that student's profile to the scholarships that make sense for them. So the first time they go in and register, they're going to get a report back that says, hey, check out this, this, and this, and a lot of them is just a matter of clicking the link that they give you, and then all the information will be right there. Once you're in the system, you're going to put in your email address, and periodically, I want to say at least weekly, they'll send a weekly update and say, hey, here's some new stuff that we found for you. And I'll be honest, sometimes, like I was looking at it in class this week, sometimes it'll be as simple as a writing contest, but the top prize is $5,000. And so some students say, well, gosh, if I write all these essays, I could have just gone and gotten a job. But you never know. So yeah, there's a trade-off because there's some work involved, but some of them are really simple, just a matter of filling out a form, and if you meet the qualifications. There's a lot of them for, you know,
Are the
certain...
students lazy?
Yes, they're very, very lazy. They're very, very lazy. So it takes a lot of arm twisting. I had a student this week said that he was trying to get a job and he went to the rave and they wouldn't hire him. Surely there was something I could do. And so I said, well, send me your resume, and you know, because we always get employers calling saying, hey, do you have a student that can do this? It may just be for a month, or it may be 10 hours a week for the school year. And so he said, well, what's a resume? Can you show me how to get one of those? And they kind of want you to do it for them, but I guess that's what we're there for, to show them how to do it themselves.
So that's like for undergrad?
It's both. The FastWeb is for both. I think they have more undergraduate opportunities, but you just put all your information in and it'll match whatever they've got. Is that it?